The baby's cry cut through the wind like a thin knife, a sound so hungry it seemed to shake frost from the cottonwoods. When Mabel stepped down from the stage at Lone Willow Crossing, the coach lurched away and took the last warmth with it. The sky had the color of a pewter bowl, and the wind brought the smell of snow, old wood smoke, and something sadder. A tall man stood near the rail, hat in hand, face hollowed by sleeplessness. A bundle shifted in his arms. The little mouth opened. Again, and the cry rose, desperate and raw. "Mr. Mercer," Mabel asked, breath fogging. The man's eyes went from her worn carpet bag to the broad plane of her shoulders and back up again. Plenty of folks had that look. The measuring one. The kind that calculated worth and waste. Mabel braced for it. That familiar pinch around another person's mouth when they decided she took up more room than she had a right to. "Eli," he said. "I sent for a cook, housekeeper too, if willing." The baby cried again, and Mabel's body answered before her mind did, a pang that was part ache, part memory. She had told herself in the mirror of the boarding house, "This is for wages only. This is for a roof and safe sleep. You owe your heart to no one." But the small fist clutching the edge of the blanket tore through all those careful sentences. "No one wants a fat girl, sir," she said, keeping her voice even. "But I can nurse the baby." Eli's head jerked a little, as if struck by news, from far off. The wind rushed around them, and the street dog nosed a cob of corn from the gutter, and the sign of Bjornson's Mercantile groaned on its iron chain. Somewhere, a piano plinked a hymn that couldn't quite find itself. Eli's hands tightened around the baby. He looked at Mabel the way a man looks at rain clouds after months of dust. "Then stay," he said. The decision landed in Mabel's bones like heat. She took the baby, tucked her inside her coat, and climbed into Eli's wagon. The girl's name was Ruthie. She had a cowlick that would not be tamed, and eyes too old for her weeks. The moment Mabel's milk let down, Ruthie sighed. A sound, so relieved it drew tears Mabel didn't admit to. The road to the Mercer ranch ran along the river, thin as a strip of tin and rimed with ice. Stands of willow shook in the wind, and across the water, low blue mountains hunched like sleeping oxen. The ranch itself rose out of the gray afternoon, house of weathered pine, barn with one hinge complaining, a corral where two dun mares turned their heads as if to ask who had come and why. Inside, the rooms smelled of cedar shavings and cold iron. A crib stood in the corner with a quilt half finished, thread still in the needle. Mabel noted the tidy rows that stopped abruptly, the kind of break only grief makes. She set her bag near the stove and rolled her sleeves. She found salt, beans, a little bacon, 2 onions trying to sprout under the eaves. Her hands knew what to do. She set a pot to soak, chopped slow and steady, added the rind from the bacon end like a promise. Eli hovered in the doorway like a man who had not yet learned how to move through his own house. He kept looking at Ruthie, then at Mabel, as if making sure both remained. "My wife," he said finally, the words splintering as they came. "Mary. Fever took her a month after Ruthie. I didn't know who to send for. The men at the livery said a cook off the stage would be less talk than a nurse. Less expensive, too." Mabel nodded like a woman receiving weather. "I am both today," she said, "and I am a pair of ears that don't ask if you're not ready." The wind picked up. Somewhere out near the north fence, a gate slammed. When Mabel opened the back door to fetch wood, the horizon showed 3 riders cutting along the ridge, just silhouettes and moving fast. Eli's gaze sharpened. He stepped closer to the door, the shape of wariness settling onto him like a familiar coat. "Trouble?" Mabel asked. "Red Jack Caro's boys move stock through here when snow's coming," Eli said. "They put their brands where God can't see. Last summer, the sheriff ran them to the reservation line and they slid off like oil. I've got nothing they want but land and quiet. That's more than most men have, so I suppose it's something." "Mabel," wondered whether quiet could ever be called a small thing. Quiet was a kind of bread. Quiet was sleep without fear. She stirred the beans and set biscuits to rise on the back of the stove and hummed the slow Irish tune her mother used to call Fire into Wet Wood. Ruthie nursed and slept, a small world turning. After supper, simple, hot, clean, the baby woke fretful, and Mabel rocked her by the window, watching the dark pour itself over the river. Eli mended a halter by lamplight. His hands were strong in a way that had nothing to do with crushing and everything to do with mending. Mabel filed the sight away like a needle in felt. "Folks will talk," he said without looking up, "about you nursing her, about you living here." "Folks always talk," Mabel answered, "and they never once put wood in my box for all their words. Besides, the baby's hungry is the only truth that matters." He set the leather aside. "I'll pay standard wages, and more when the beef goes east." Mabel nodded. Wages meant choice. Choice meant breath. Later, when the snow began, heavy as sifted flour, Mabel stepped out to shake the flakes from the washing line. A woman stood by the cottonwood wrapped in a red wool blanket, hair braided in 2 ropes. Her face was the kind that did not hurry to speak. "I am too, geese woman," she said in Lakota, and then in slow English. "Mary was my friend. I came when I saw the stage bring you." Mabel felt the old fear of being measured, foreign to herself again. But 2 geese woman looked at Ruthie first and smiled so soft the snow seemed to fall more gently. "The baby eats," 2 geese woman said. "Good. The men up north move like coyotes tonight. Keep the barn doors barred and keep fire." "We will," Mabel said. "Thank you." When the woman had gone, leaving a hush like a prayer, Mabel returned to the house and stood by the crib. Ruthie's chest rose and fell. Eli slept in his chair, boots still on, as if he hadn't convinced his body to trust a bed. The snow whispered against the windows. In town, Bjornsson would be laying out his Norwegian candles, and the Irish sheriff would be setting chess pieces he had no one to play. In the dark beyond the barn, hooves shifted. Mabel had come a long road to reach a job that would keep her fed. She had not expected to feel a rope thrown across her heart and cinched tight. She had not expected a baby's breath to steady all the torn places. She had not expected that a widower's simple words, "Then stay," would sound like the first. 2 boards of a small bridge built over a winter river. That night she dreamed of warm milk and of a quilt with its last stitches finished. In the morning, she woke to the smell of smoke that did not come from her stove. Mabel reached the yard with a bucket and a shout. Smoke braided up from the hayloft, blue, black, and sly. The snow had slowed to a steady sift, and ash mixed with the flakes like pepper and milk. Eli was already there, coat thrown over his nightshirt, face set in the grim line of a man who hadn't finished grieving but had to work anyway. "Lantern kicked," Eli said, but Mabel's eyes went to the far fence where a hat brim dipped and rose. "A match might have walked on 2 legs. "No use cursing flame," Mabel said. "Bring water, and quick." They formed a chain. Eli, Mabel, and a hired boy from the neighboring place who had come with the dawn to trade eggs for oats, passing, sloshing buckets up the ladder. Heat licked their faces. Ruthie's cry carried from the open house door, thin with fright. Mabel thought of the baby's belly, the new trust warming both of them, and worked faster. 2 geese woman's words, hushed at her ear, "Keep fire." By noon, the loft smoldered harmlessly, and the mares trembled in their stalls but still breathed. Mabel's hands shook as she ladled stew for the men. She listened to the quiet that follows flames, a quiet thick with questions. "Jack Caro won't waste a whole barn," the hired boy muttered. "He just wants to fright." "He wants to measure," Eli said, knuckles white around the spoon. "And he wants us to know he is measuring." "Then we answer in our own measure," Mabel said, suddenly certain. "We set watch. We put coffee on through the night, And you go into town and speak to the sheriff even if there's no proof. A man warned is different from a man asleep." Eli looked at her for a long moment, and the look had no pity in it, only respect. "I'll ride in the morning," he said. "You'll be all right?" Mabel smiled, small but true. "I've stood alone with worse than snow." The town was a handful of buildings stitched to a river bend, but it held the world's whole catalog of longings. Bjornson with his tidy ledger and his rough charitableness. The Irish Sheriff Finnegan with a crooked nose and a chessboard polished by his own patience. A Norwegian seamstress named Sina, who sang a song about a ship that left Bergen and found its way, barefoot, to Kansas. A boy who swept the saloon for stale biscuits while dreaming of the Pacific Ocean he had only ever seen in a book. And talk. So much talk. Always the heatless kind that burned pride anyway. "The fat cook up at Mercer's," someone at the Mercantile whispered as Eli bought nails. "Came off the stage with soft hands and hard eyes. Bet she thinks that, baby. We'll buy her a wedding." "The fat cook," Mabel repeated later, drying a plate slow. She said it without bitterness. She had learned to take words in and set them back out in a different shape. That evening, 2 geese women returned with a medicine pouch and a story. "Once," she said, tracing a shape in flour on Mabel's table, "a woman hid a blaze under snow until it waited like a fox. When the men came to steal her food, she kicked the snow away and the fire rose and sang their hair. The lesson is not the trick, it is the keeping. She watched her fire every hour, and because of that, she was not surprised." Mabel nodded. "Then we will be keepers." Midweek, the butchered beef went salt-side down into barrels, and the chickens scolded the wind. Ruthie's cheeks pinked, and Mabel told her stories about Dublin streets she barely remembered, and about ships, and about the way flour clings to fingers, making small maps. The rhythm of care tightened the loose boards of the house. Eli slept. 1 hour in 3, eyes open to whatever hoofbeats came. So they were ready, though it still jarred the nerves like a pistol crack, when the arson came honest in the night. A bottle of lamp oil crashed against the porch post and shattered into a mouth of flame. Eli was at the pump before the glass finished skittering. Mabel seized a rug, soaked it, threw it over the licking fire, stood on it like a woman stomping grapes until steam roared up. The hired boy fired a warning shot toward the cottonwoods, the sound rolling out over snowfields like thunder. Silence fell. The kind of silence that means someone is listening back to you. "They'll be back," Eli said. "Then our coffee will stay hot," Mabel answered, voice steady. The next day, Sheriff Finnegan came up the road in a coat 2 sizes too small. A sign he'd taken it from a gambler in a hurry. With him rode Sina, face bright with outrage. "He tried to sell matches dear yesterday," she said, Swedish syllables kissing the words, "to the boys who work for Caro." "I told the sheriff." Finnegan nodded. "We'll post 2 men at the bend. No law stands too tall in winter, but a deputy's shadow can make a weasel think twice." Mabel served them stew and bread that had risen brave despite the cold. She listened as people who were not born to the same tongue made a shared grammar out of danger. She cleaned the bowls and sang Ruthie to sleep. She pretended her mind was quiet. That night, a hand-lettered sign appeared on the gate. "Sell or burn." Eli took it down without comment. Mabel saved it in the drawer with the biscuit cutters. She did not know why yet, only that some threats make useful kindling for a later useful fire. The thaw came crooked. Mornings held ice on their teeth. Afternoons broke wet and black, and the river swelled, crowding its banks like a man shouldering through a door. Mabel hauled, scrubbed, baked, and hummed, a metronome that kept fear from setting its own time. Ruthie's laugh arrived one dusk like a bird, quick and astonished. Eli heard it and stopped with his hand on the stall latch, eyes filling before he could guard them. "She laughs like her mother," he said. "She laughs like herself," Mabel answered, because sometimes the kindest thing is to see the living as living. Trouble does not sleep during a thaw. It only takes a different road. One afternoon, when Mabel went to town for lamp oil, a whisper ran ahead of her like mice under floorboards. At Bjornson's counter, a woman with a bonnet pulled down sharp said, "Did you hear? Mercer's cook stole a ring from a strongbox. She's got reason to stay, and it isn't milk." Sina's chin tipped up. "I hear nothing like that," she said. "I hear only that she makes bread softer than snow and that Ruthie grows." The rumor wanted blood, though. Mabel felt its teeth as she walked home. The wind set to howling, and the cottonwoods answered with their own low song. "Nasir, the ford." Two men stepped out onto the road, faces raw from cold, hats pulled low. "Caro sends regards," one said, "and says where there is smoke, there is a woman with sticky fingers." "I have flour on my hands," Mabel said calmly, "and grease from the skillet. If you want to see your faces in a clean pan, I advise you to step aside and let me go." Thut. Men laughed, the brittle sound of those who have not been laughed with in years. One reached for the mule's bridle. Mabel clicked her tongue. The mule laid his ears back and showed yellow teeth. There are alliances no outlaw remembers to consider. The men stepped away, cursing, more at the mule than at Mabel, and she drove on. She said nothing about it when she reached the house. She set the oil by the lamp, kissed Ruthie's foot, pinched off biscuits, and stacked kindling like a sentence meant to convince a heart to beat. Later, when Eli asked how town had been, she said, "Winter makes people say things to keep their blood moving. We'll give them spring instead." But the rumor crossed thresholds like smoke. Sheriff Finnegan came again, hat in his hands. "Someone swore they saw a ring at your place," he said, not meeting Mabel's eyes. "I wouldn't usually lend ear to fools, but fools become juries when you aren't careful." Eli's face went tight. For a breath, Mabel saw fear and something near it but meaner. Doubt. It flickered, quick as a match. Her throat burned. "Look," she said, opening the drawer where she had slipped the hand-lettered sign. She laid it on the table. Next to it, she placed the medicine pouch two geese women had given her, the small silver thimble that had belonged to Mary, and the key to the larder on a length of red ribbon. "This is what I keep. This is what I count." Finnegan stared at the sign. He lifted it like it might burn him, then shook his head. "Caro's handwriting," he said. "I seen it on a note to a judge once. Loot, land, and lies. I'll be watching the ford tonight." Eli's mouth-shaped apology, then shut again before it could get out. Mabel saw the struggle and forgave it before he managed his words. Forgiveness, she had learned, is sometimes a way of safeguarding yourself, not only the other. That night, the river rose harder. Ice groaned. The baby coughed and burned hot under Mabel's palm. "Fever," Mabel said, calm through a panic that rolled like thunder. "Stoke the fire! Water! Now!" Eli moved quick. Mabel bathed Ruthie in tepid water, spooned willow bark, tea, and rocked. Two geese women came in silent as weather, laid cool hands on Ruthie's head, and sang in Lakota, a melody built of prairie grass and the names of geese. The fever hovered, choosing. "Tell me a story," Eli said into the fear. Mabel told him the one of the Dublin girl who learned to make a stew that could persuade a man not to draw his gun. "She put everything in it," Mabel said, "including the names of the people who had ever loved her. Sometimes remembering makes broth. The knight wanted to take the baby and leave the winter as payment. Mabel did not let it. She sat with Ruthie until dawn, humming and counting breaths. When the fever broke, it was like a window unlatched. Ruthie sighed the small sigh that meant the body had chosen to stay. The river thanked them by throwing a tree at the bridge. At noon, water bucked the banks. A cottonwood, roots and all, slammed against the pilings, and the bridge groaned. Eli ran for the ropes. Mabel gathered blankets and flour because a woman in a house that might be cut off by water thinks of feeding the trapped as much as of escape. Finnegan and two of his boys appeared, faces raw, boots splashed black. They anchored lines like stitches in a wound. Cena came with a basket of rye buns and a song. Two geese women stood knee-deep in the flood on the shallow side, guiding. Debris with a pole like a midwife easing a shoulder through. Someone would tell this story later, how Norwegians and Lakota and an Irish sheriff and a widowed rancher and a fat cook held a river in its season and persuaded it to pass without taking more than a fence post. They would tell it with laughter and turn the fear into a rope swing. But while it was happening, it was only work, breath by breath. That night, when the house settled again and the fire found its slow heart, Eli brought a small wooden box to the table. He opened it and set a plain gold ring in Mabel's palm. His hands shook in a way that had nothing to do with cold. "This was Mary's mother's," he said. "I don't know what to call what we are. I know only that Ruthie stops crying. When you hold her and that my house sounds like a home when you move in it. I know men are saying your name like a misdeed. I would like to say it like a vow. A marriage would make the talk softer. But I don't ask that. I ask only what you need so you can bear to stay." Mabel stared at the ring and felt the old walls inside her push and buckle. She thought of every glance that had weighed her and found her too much. She thought of the word nurse and how it meant feeding and healing and also guarding something precious with your life. She thought of Ruthie, who had already woven their lives together with milk and breath. And she thought of choice, that thin gold line a person draws for herself. "Give me a day," she said, voice soft but steady. "A day to decide what shape my staying should take." Outside, a coyote sang. Inside, the ring lay warm against her skin, as if it had been waiting for a hand just this size, just this strength. Morning came with the smell of sage and ash. Caro moved again, this time not with fire at night, but with daylight edges and legal words. A folded paper arrived by a boy who chewed his lip pink. It said the river easement belonged to Caro's outfit by virtue of a deed signed in 1869, by a man already under the river then. The paper shone with official ink and oily certainty. "It won't hold," Finnegan said, squinting. "But the judge likes his whiskey, and Caro carries a barrel under his coat." Meanwhile, Mabel said, "The cattle still need water, and the baby still needs milk, and the men still need bread." Two geese women brought news of a skirmish in the breaks, where Caro's boys had traded tin cups for beef with a band of young Apache men who did not yet know the word patience. "Caro will shift blame," she said, "and then he will ask for tribute. Do not pay." Mabel made biscuits that cracked when you smiled at them. She salted them with her own sweat and sweetened them with a stubbornness she no longer apologized for. She took the ring out of her apron and set it in the window light, letting it glint on the sill while she worked. All day, she wore it bare, on her palm, training her hand to the weight. Toward dusk, a rider came fast with blood on his sleeve. One of Finnegan's men, a kid whose name hadn't stuck yet because he was still trying out 3 or 4 for himself. "Ambush," he gasped. 2 miles past the ford. They got the sheriff in a ditch and said they want the deed or they cut him like fence wire. Eli was already at the rack for the rifles. Mabel's heart went odd and bright, like metal in cold water. "You'll die if you go alone," she said, and then, before he could answer, "And I won't let Ruthie learn that courage is a thing men walk out the door with while women fold shirts." She strapped Ruthie into a sling tight against her chest. She made the movement with a precision that was also prayer. Two geese women nodded as if to say yes. A woman can carry food and a warning and a child and still ride. They took the lower path, where willows leaned and the ground stayed damp, where an ambusher might choose to wait but might also be surprised. Mabel kept her breath even and her ears open. She had learned to hear how the world holds its own counsel. The way birds go quiet, not only when men pass, but when they think of passing. the way water quickens when it lies about its depth. The ditch opened ahead, a dark mouth. Voices rose from it. Laughter cut with hunger. Mabel smelled tobacco and rag wool gone damp. She tasted fear and the memory of peelers in Dublin lanes. She rode right up to the lip and looked down. Finnegan lay in mud, hat gone, blood on his ear. Two men crouched, with pistols. A third sat on a log, bored, cleaning dirt from his nails with a knife. Their faces arranged themselves, first in surprise, then in recognition, then in that greedy delight that some men's eyes get when they see a woman they think is alone. "I brought food," Mabel called down before they could speak, holding up a cloth-wrapped bundle. "And I brought a message. One of these will save you. Choose." The men laughed, but the smell of biscuits does what law cannot. Mabel tossed the bundle into the ditch. The one with the knife snatched it, tore the cloth, and made the sound a child makes on Christmas morning in a story. While their hands were busy with butter, Mabel's hand was busy with the rope. She dropped it like a lifeline and hissed to Finnegan, "Take it!" Eli's rifle spoke once, clean and cold. The bored one fell backward, shoulder blown wide but not mortal. He shrieked, and made it sound like the world had broken its covenant. The second shot took a pistol out of a hand. Mabel hauled, thighs screaming. Finnegan scrambled up, face wild with pain and gratitude. "God bless the biscuits," he said, and then grinned blood. "And God bless women who are not fooled by men with papers." They retreated through willows, water slapping their boots. Ruthie slept the sleep of infants who trust that the beating thing in the big body will keep time no matter what. Bullets spat mud at their heels. Two geese women appeared from the cotton like a fact, swung onto Eli's spare mount, and turned to face the ditch with a calm older than the men in it. "Go," she said without raising her voice. "I will make them look at the wrong horizon." Mabel rode with her jaw set, thinking of the ring on the windowsill catching last light. If it was still there when she returned, it would mean the shape of her staying had decided itself. Back at the house, Sina was pacing with a broom like a halberd. "I thought to fight moths while you were gone," she blurted when they burst in, "but I would have fought men too." Finnegan sagged into a chair, breathing hard. "They'll call for a reckoning," he said. "Caro won't leave it to mud and biscuits." Eli wiped mud from his cheek and looked at Mabel with a question so gentle it could only be asked by a man already in love. Mabel walked to the window and picked up the ring. The gold had held the day's light and felt warmer than anything that wasn't alive. "You asked what shape my staying should take," she said, voice low. "I have known too many shapes that were cages. But this one looks like a door." She slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit as if it had been already telling stories about this. Eli's breath left him in a laugh and a sob at once. Finnegan whooped and slapped his knee, then winced because he had no knee left that wanted slapping. "I will not marry to quiet talk," Mabel added, meeting Eli's eyes. "I will marry because we are a home already, and I would put a name to what we've made. I will marry because when I rode into Willows, my first thought was to keep you breathing, and because when the baby laughs, the house learns a new word, and that word is us." Eli nodded, words gone thin in his throat. "Then stay," he repeated, but this time the words were not an invitation. They were a vow. Caro chose spring for his last strike, counting on mud to slow the sheriff and pride to quicken his own boots. He came at dawn with 6 men and a paper like a shield. He expected to find a house half afraid, a woman who had spent her courage already. He found coffee boiling like a warning and a table set for a wedding breakfast. The preacher had been fetched in a wagon that protested every rut. Sina brought a bouquet of sage and willow catkins. 2 geese women wore a beaded belt so fine it made the morning stand up straighter. Bjornson carried a loaf of rye so heavy it could have held a door open against a long wind. Finnegan, stitched and splinted but grinning, stood with a badge pinned to his coat like a stubborn idea. "You can wave your paper," Mabel told Caro, voice even. But it's as empty as your threats. You smell like a man who has never fed a hungry thing without asking what he will get in return. That smell turns my stomach." Caro smiled the smile of men who collect other men to do their smiling. "I'll take the river," he said, "and the cattle, and if you're smart, you'll hand me the deed and a tray of those biscuits to sweeten my ride." Mabel stepped aside. Behind her, the door opened, and a line of people filed out of the house. The preacher, the Norwegian seamstress, the Lakota friend, the Irish lawman, a kid who had not yet chosen his name, 2 ranch hands with hay in their hair, a boy from the saloon with a broom like a soldier's pike. They took places on the porch as if it were a stage. Eli came last, holding Ruthie high, the baby's cheeks buttered by sleep and milk. Mabel looked at them and felt a calm so deep it startled her. "You can try to take the river," Eli said, to Caro. "But I have learned how to dam a flood with neighbors. I have learned a cook's biscuits can be artillery and a mother's milk can be a treaty with death. I have learned that love makes a place where the wind cannot take every loose thing. What have you learned, Jack?" Caro's face flexed. He lifted his hand. 2 of his men raised rifles. "Fire," Caro said. The word hung a fraction too long. In that fraction, the door on the barn swung wide, pushed by a rope Mabel had set at dawn. Out thundered the dun mares and 2 steers with heads low, eyes wild. Behind them, with a shout that cracked like good kindling, came 2 geese women on Eli's spare mount, driving the animals across the yard with precision that would make a general reconsider his career. The steers hit the line of Caro's men and scattered them like dried stalks. A rifle fired harmless into sky. Mud swallowed boots to the ankle. Someone yelped as a steer's horn took his belt and pried at once. "You brought beasts to a gunfight," Caro spat, scrambling backward. "No," Mabel said, stepping down from the porch, cheeks flushed, hair pinned so tight it might have held a bridge. "We brought a town." Finnegan's deputies rose from the haystack where they'd been sleeping like cats and leveled their own rifles. Sina produced a length of rope that she had braided prettier than a wedding sash and faster than sin. In 3 motions, she had a man trussed like a Christmas goose. Bjornson swung his rye loaf like a cudgel and knocked a pistol clean from a hand, then said, "Sorry" on reflex, then hit another fellow for symmetry. The kid without a name darted behind Caro and kicked his knees, a move he'd learned from mules. Caro found himself on his back, looking up at a circle of faces, speaking a dozen stories and 1 language, the language of enough. "We are finished." "With your paper," Mabel said. "We are finished with your smoke. We are finished with you measuring our lives like cattle you haven't earned." Caro reached for a knife. 2 geese women placed her boot on his wrist, not hard, just certain. "No more," she said. He believed her. They took Caro to town under a sky that had shaken off winter. The judge, who had liked whiskey yesterday, found the taste turned to ash in his mouth when Sina stood at the back of the room with arms folded. The easement deed melted under questions like ice in river water. The charges pinned to Caro's. Coat flowered into a bouquet even a friendly court couldn't ignore. He went to a cell. He would go to a trial. The outcome would be what it would be, but it would be in daylight, not in ditches. The wedding took place that afternoon because you do not let a day held by fear go to bed without giving it another name. The preacher's Bible fell open to a psalm, and his voice shook only a little. Eli's hand shook a lot. Mabel's did not shake at all. She spoke her vows the way she kneaded dough, firm, patient, making something rise. When the ring slid home, Ruthie laughed, and the sound set swallows loose from the eaves. The feast was not much by city standards, but it tasted like the kind of wealth no one can tax. Stew that had cooked down until it told the truth. Biscuits that cracked like jokes. Rye bread strong enough to lean on. Coffee black enough to wake the far hills. 2 geese women brought a pot of chokecherry syrup so tart it made the mouth remember all its promises. Sina sang about ships and foundings. The kid without a name tried 3 new ones, and everyone agreed the last suited him. Tom, plain and sturdy. As dusk unrolled its purple cloth, Eli and Mabel stood by the cottonwoods, the first stars snagging in the upper branches. He touched her cheek, reverent as if it were an altar rail. "You saved me," he said. "No," she answered. "We saved each other, and the town helped, and the river let itself be persuaded." She looked down at Ruthie, already asleep a sling against her chest, mouth open a little, tiny fist curled in possession of everything good. Mabel breathed in the smell of milk and wood smoke, sage and clean sweat, the perfume of a life not fancy but inarguably theirs. "They'll keep talking," Eli warned, a smile in it this time. "Let them," Mabel said. "When they say fat, I will hear full, full of courage, full of kindness, full of bread. When they say cook, I will hear keeper, of fire and baby and man and town." He laughed, quiet and grateful. "Then stay," he said again, and for the 3rd time, those 2 words built another board on the bridge that had carried them over winter. The wind shifted, soft as a woman turning in sleep. Coyotes barked their ragged hymn, and someone in the house started a new song, one that Mabel did not recognize but knew already how to hum. She felt the ring warm on her finger and the steady weight of Ruthie, and the steadier weight of being wanted, not as charity, but as choice. There are stories that end at the wedding and the crook-necked child. There are stories that end at the trial and the town gathered. This one turned its face toward summer and kept walking. In the fields, young corn shouldered up. On the porch, Mabel set a pan of biscuits in morning sun and watched them rise as if heat could be inherited, as if every good thing would lift if only you fed it, steadied it, kept watch, and shared.